Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to start with the story of the foolish scientist. The foolish scientist had a frog, and he was going to see how far a frog could jump after his legs, one by one, were cut off. And so, the first time with 4 legs, he said, "Jump, frog, jump." And the frog jumped 25 centimeters. So he wrote that down in his book. And then he cut 1 leg off. He said, "Jump, frog, jump." And with 3 legs, it jumped only 17 centimeters. Then he cut another leg off. It only had 2 legs left. He said, "Jump, frog, jump." And it only jumped 12 centimeters. Cut the 3rd leg off. "Jump, frog, jump." And it was only able to jump 6 centimeters with 1 leg. He then cut the last leg off and said, "Jump, frog, jump." And he didn't move 1 millimeter. He then said, "Jump, frog, jump." And he didn't move 1 millimeter. So he wrote down in his book, after 4 amputations, the frog went deaf. Good observations, lousy conclusions. Now, in our topic this afternoon on hellfire, God's love and hellfire number 3, we're going to see there's a lot of good observations about certain verses in the Bible, but lousy conclusions. Now, in our last seminar, we saw that at the second coming of Jesus, the saints are going to be raptured. This is called the first resurrection and the first death of the wicked slain by the glory of God. That leads us into what we call the millennium, or the 1,000 years, which we're going to study on Tuesday night. We're going to spend a whole night on this beautiful prophecy in the Bible. And then after the 1,000 years, New Jerusalem comes down from God out of heaven, according to Revelation chapter 21. And then that's the second resurrection of damnation. Hellfire is going to be poured out, consume everything. It's called the second death of the wicked by hellfire. And so that's just a little synopsis of what will happen. It's going to consume this whole world, both sin and sinners, and God's going to recreate a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwells righteousness. Let's go to Mark chapter 9 and verse 43. In Mark chapter 9 and verse 43, we see one of these verses that some people say contradict what we just been reading. But it's all very simple, very clear. And let's just go here and try to understand what the Bible is saying. We learned in our last seminar that hellfire is going to burn up sin and sinners. It's going to go out. They're going to be turned to ashes. There's not going to be a coal to warm at. And there's going to be a recreation of a new heaven and a new earth. And hellfire will not, I repeat, will not burn for the ceaseless ages of eternity. But Mark 9:43 through 4 seems to contradict that in some people's mind. In my mind, it's very clear and easy to understand, but I thought I better bring this up and help you to understand what the Bible is saying here. Mark chapter 9, and let's begin with verse 43. "And if your hand offends you, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life maimed than having 2 hands to go into hell, into a fire that shall never be" what? Quenched. This is unquenchable fire. Look at verse 44. "Where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched." All right, well, this is very simple to understand. Unquenchable fire. People say, well, see, this proves that fire, the hellfire, is unquenchable, so it lasts forever. Now, I've got a question for you. As you read verses 43 and 4, do any of those verses say that hellfire lasts forever? No. Not one of those verses say that hellfire lasts forever. It doesn't tell us the duration of hellfire. It tells us the quality of hellfire, not the quantity, time-wise, of hellfire. And so what is unquenchable fire? Well, what that means is when hellfire is kindled, you could pour all the water in New Zealand on the fire and you could not quench it. You could take all the water from the Pacific Ocean and pour it on hellfire and you could not quench it. But once the fire has done its job, then does it go out? You better believe it. We read in Malachi chapter 4 that once the fire does its job and turns everything to ashes, that it's all going to go out, and that's going to be the end of hellfire. Now, their worm dies not. Well, this is the same term that we read a few minutes ago, is the worm doesn't die as long as it's got flesh to eat. But once it eats up the flesh, then the worm has done his work, and that's the end of hellfire. I don't know about you, but I don't want any of them worms eating on my carcass. How about you? Ooh, that sounds sick, especially when you're alive. Okay, so that's the unquenchable fire. Look at Isaiah 34 and verse 8 through 10. I'm going to put it on the board to save time here. For it is the day of the Lord's vengeance, and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become. And by the way, here's that word brimstone. And in today's language, what is that translated according to Ross Patterson? Into sulfur. All right. And the land thereof shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched in night or day. The smoke thereof shall go up forever and ever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. So it shall not be quenched night or day. Well, this is talking about the land of Edom, and this is God's judgment on the land of Edom. It did end up burning night and day. Do you know how long it burned? It burned several days or even weeks. Question, is it still burning now 3,000 years later? No. All that's saying here is that as long as it's burning, it can't be quenched. Jeremiah 17:27, but if you will not hearken unto me and hallow the Sabbath day and not bear a burden, even entering to the gates of Jerusalem on the Sabbath day, then I will kindle a fire in the gates thereof, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem, and it shall not be quenched. This is God's judgment against Jerusalem. The Jews were breaking the Sabbath day. God said, this is one of my 10 commandments. And when you break any of my commandments, my judgments come upon you. And so he warned the Jews that if they didn't obey the commandments of God, the Sabbath commandment, that he would pour fire upon them. And guess what, folks? It happened. Jerusalem was burned twice, once by the Babylonians and once by the Romans. And I've even stood under the gate, one of the gates in Jerusalem. This is a picture of me a few weeks ago. And I've got a question for you. Does it look like it's burning? No, it's not burning whatsoever. You see, just because it talks about a fire that can't be quenched, it simply means at the time that it's burning that it can't be quenched. All right, let's go to Matthew chapter 25 and verse 41 and see the next verse that perplexes people. This is called everlasting punishment. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 41. Matthew chapter 25 and verse 41. Matthew chapter 25, and let's begin with verse 41. It says here, Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. And let's now look at verse 46. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. All right, so this is it. The eternal hellfire, say. This talks about everlasting punishment and everlasting fire. And so this proves that it lasts forever and ever. Well, I want you to notice here, does it say everlasting punishing or punishment? It says punishment. So how long does the punishment, the results of the punishment last? Forever. What is the punishment? Turned into ashes. So how long do the ashes stay there according to Malachi chapter 4? Forever. So there's a big difference between punishment and punishing. You know, if I were punishing these three folks up here on the front pew, you know, lashing them. Okay, and let's say I was going to punish them today. Would that be different if I said I was going to punish them all day? Would it be punishing or punishment? If they receive punishment, it would just be a temporary thing. If they receive punishing, I would be lashing them all day today and all day tomorrow. All right? And so there's a big difference between that. That clears that up. So no problem with that verse. Look at Jude 1:7. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities about them, in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of what? Of eternal fire. Question. Whatever you believe about Sodom and Gomorrah, I really don't mind. If you believe Sodom and Gomorrah is the bottom of the Dead Sea, that's okay. I don't believe that. If you believe Sodom and Gomorrah is in the plains, like Ross just shared with us, I don't mind that. I don't mind what you believe. Here's my question, though. Is Sodom and Gomorrah still burning today as I talk to you? No, of course it's not. Okay, so they suffered eternal fire. The eternal fire was not the length of the fire. The eternal fire was the results of the fire. Very, very simple here. 2 Peter 2:6. Turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them with an overthrow, making them an example to those that should live ungodly thereafter.